Hi everyone. I'm Alex Sirek. I am the Marketing and Communications intern at the Loft Literary Center, and I am here meeting with Mary Carroll Moore. Mary, do you want to give us a little bit of an introduction on you and your work?
Sure. I'm so happy to be here. And hi to all my friends at the Loft, one of my very favorite places in the world to teach and learn. So I've been teaching at the Loft since like, oh gosh, probably 20 years. Is that possible? And I live in New Hampshire now. I used to live in the cities, and I really love everything that the Loft embodies, the community and all of the parts that help you stretch in every way. So my history a little bit is that I started teaching at the Loft back in 2000. I had recovered from breast cancer, and I wanted to give some kind of gift back to the community that had supported me during that trial. And so I went to the Loft director at that time, and I said, could I teach a class on writing through healing? The idea that people going through some kind of illness or grief or some kind of trauma would be able to use writing to help them heal through it. And the class sold out, and it was a benefit for the Loft. And I continued to teach, and I started to make that kind of my main avenue for teaching. I taught other places in the US, but the Loft always became my favorite. And so this fall, I'm coming back to the Loft for another benefit. It's kind of neat to do it as a bookend. I started with you guys that way, and I'm ending with this one. And this is about writing and risk, how to align your creativity and your life. And that class is also doing almost sold out, I think. So we're doing really well, and we're excited to, I'm excited to be back and communicate with all my friends again, all my Loft buddies.
Awesome. We're excited to have you. I know everyone around here has been so excited for your class, and I know I'm excited as well. And we're so excited to have you back here. So you, on your website, you mentioned that you came to writing after being a painter for a while. Could you kind of
Yeah.
speak to how you found writing and how you sort of made that transition from visual art to written art?
Yeah, it's kind of weird, a weird journey, actually. I don't know if everybody would do this, but I was a food journalist for a long time, probably another 20 years, and I had a really successful career. But I came about that career because I lived in France, and I came home with this huge passion for cooking. I was like crazy about French cooking. I had grown up with a family. My father was very kind of European in his tastes because his dad was an international lawyer who traveled a lot. So I got exposed to kind of unusual foods, I'd say, and different kinds of cooking early in my childhood. And so I wanted to live in France, and I did for a year. I was an au pair, and I studied there. And when I came home, I was asked to write a monthly cooking column for a local magazine. And that grew into cookbooks and a weekly syndicated column for the LA Times for 12 years, and a very steady and profitable career. But then when I got breast cancer in 2000, I realized that I had to look carefully at what I really wanted to do with my writing. The cancer is serious. And I didn't want to die not having reached my most important dreams as a writer. So I don't know if everybody would do this, but I quit my job and my food writing career. I was in the middle of two contracts and finished those, and went back to school. I decided to go back to school and get my MFA and learn fiction, which, gosh, another world, really. I thought as a writer for all those years, I really knew how to write, and I could translate into fiction really easily, but no way. So it was a good number of years later that my first novel was accepted for publication. And that's the transition from my food background and my painting, which is one of the reasons I went to France, into this whole love of writing, which has just become my center really for art and creativity.
Absolutely. That's so sweet. I had no idea about the France thing, the columnist thing. It seems like you have such like a deep history of just like creativity and like expansive knowledge. That's so cool. Do
Yeah.
you kind of see an overlap in different sorts of like different, like I guess modalities of creativity, whether it be the column, the painting, the food, and now your career as a fiction writer?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Alex. I think we all overlap, right? Whatever we do kind of translates into the next thing that we try to do. And I think as a painter, I'm still a visual artist, but as a painter, I really was involved with color and texture and form. I'm an impressionist style painter, so like the whole approach to painting that style is that light creates form, distance, and atmosphere. So you study the way the light hits something and it creates the shape, basically. So I kind of translated that into my writing, and I found such comfort in food writing first because it's totally about sensory detail, how you taste and what something feels like in your mouth, and then moving on to the smell and, texture, everything like that. So then when I started writing fiction, it was a little bit of a joke because in my MFA program, I was assigned, and I'm glad I was, two advisors who were minimalists, meaning that they were not into setting, it was just basically like a Raymond Carver kind of writer. And wow, that was such a shock to me because I came from this like rich tapestry of words. And I remember sending in some chapters of my novel, and my advisor like took her red pen and X'd out whole pages and wrote enough on the margin in red pen. And, it was like a shock to realize that I had to learn how to balance this. So my love of the senses had to be balanced with like the other side of writing, which is of course how the story moves. So the sensual part of writing for me, which was my passion, had to be in service to the story rather than take over the story. And that's kind of what I learned over those years studying minimalism as a writer. And, I still love the lush writing, but I now know how to balance it better with something that moves the story forward, really. So it was
Absolutely.
difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you did you kind of find it to be like quite quite a big adjustment transition period? Like I'm assuming probably a lot of check-ins with other peers as well.
Years. I mean, really, I
Yeah.
think I had to study, I had to kind of start at the beginning again, even though I was a professional paid writer. I had a career in writing, but I really didn't know how to do this part. I knew how to write good food writing. I even did health and science writing for a while and journalism. But when it came down to writing fiction, it was like, oh, God, I have to study. So I started out, I took classes with all kinds of people, Eleanor Lipman and Joseph Novakovich and all these different writers at the Loft, and everywhere I could find somebody, and studied like, how do you do this? This is a like studying Russian. It's a whole different language. So it was really, yes, you're right. It was really challenging for me. I guess the main thing I would say to people who are in this kind of situation is you don't actually give up who you are. You stay authentic to your own style as a writer, because the tendency that I had was to completely abandon who I was, the goodness of me as a writer, in favor of this other approach, the minimalists say, or the way somebody else, like if Joseph wrote this way, I thought, oh, I've got to be like Joseph, but you don't. And as you mature as a writer, I think you learn how to kind of combine who you are with all these other influences so that you remain intact with your particular gift. And then you're also taking in all this wonderful information about how to modify and balance what you have, your tendencies. So that's
Mm.
just what I wanted to add in case people take
Right.
what I said was like, oh God, I have to throw out everything I am. You don't.
Absolutely. And so speaking a little bit about craft, so you've written extensively and taught extensively about the craft of writing, and even you published your book starts here, and that details basically everything about the publishing process. Do
Yeah.
you have any brief advice for emerging writers trying to write their first books?
Well, I'm going to refer to somebody called Mr. Beast, who's an incredibly popular social media guy. I mean, he has so many billions of followers, it's ridiculous. But I don't really follow him, but I did find one thing he said to be very important in this regard, and what you're asking, Alex, is he says to succeed on social media, you need to ignore the algorithm. And I think the same thing holds true for writers. Say you're starting out with your first book. During the writing process, just the drafting process, you have to really ignore those trends, the best ways to get published, the things other people did, and really write from your heart. Find your own core of who you are as a writer. I remember that film. There was a film that I loved a long time ago called Finding Forrester. I think it had Sean Connery in it, and it was about this young man who gets mentored by this reclusive, I think it's modeled on J.D. Salinger, a really reclusive writer who hasn't been out of his apartment for years. And this guy who's a basketball player and brilliant somehow gets a dare to go into his apartment, and they end up becoming friends. And the young man gets mentored by this older recluse. And the man who teaches him says, you draft from your heart and you edit from your head. And I remember I watched the movie a couple of times just to get that line. And I think you can put a query letter or a synopsis or comp books and all the elements you'll need to get published. But to me, if a manuscript doesn't have the writer's passion in it or the heart in it, it's going to miss the mark. So over and over, I've learned this for myself, and I would say this would be my main advice, is that you have to ignore the trends and write from your heart, at least in that first draft, to capture the essence of who you are on page.
Absolutely. And I mean, that kind of goes back to what you were talking about with staying true to your style as well. I feel like that authenticity is so important. And I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like you talk a little bit about that in your course as well. So you've written so much, just this point blank, you've written a lot. So you've written an expansive number of short form works and at least 3 books, including the upcoming A Woman's Guide to Search and Rescue. Could you walk us through your creative process? I know that's a huge question, but maybe
Yeah.
even just a little brief.
Yeah. So I would say I'm pretty disciplined as a writer. This is interesting because I read a newsletter on Substack called Your Weekly Writing Exercise. And I was reading some other Substacks this week, and one of them was talking about writing routines and what people really got benefit from. And the old school, the way I've always kind of taught and believed myself, is that you write regularly. You pick a rhythm that works for you and you write to that rhythm, like it's every day or it's every week or every weekend or every 2 days a week or whatever. And this is how you actually get writing done. And I find that this works for me. I tend to be an early morning person. So when my kid was still in the house, before he got up for school, and usually before my dogs now get up, I have to kind of closet myself away with my laptop. And I come right out of sleep and dreams with some ideas, usually for whatever I'm working on. If it's a short story or working on a novel, or right now, I'm working on my pre-publication stuff for this new book, A Woman's Guide to Search and Rescue. And so I come out of that kind of quiet place and I go right, without talking to anyone, I go right into my writing. And I found that this really works for me. And the other thing that I do regularly is there's a coffee shop down the road that is, I don't know, maybe it just attracts a lot of writers, but it's got great coffee and kind of low music in the background, and everyone sits around with their laptops. It's like a weird alien scene where nobody talks to each other. They just are all writing. And so I like going there because I'm among that community, that energy of writing. And so I'll stay there for a couple of hours, and I'll usually have like an agenda, a list of things that I want to focus on, like develop a chapter or write something for a newsletter that I'm working on or whatever. So those are my 2 places that I can get kind of privacy. One is at home in silence, and the other is with others, but in silence also, because I can put on music or whatever I need. If I have to wear earbuds and do that, that's fine too. So those are my 2 like stable things with writing that I do regularly, sometimes every day. If I'm working on a novel, or a short story and I'm really cooking, I'll spend time, a couple hours a day, maybe up to 4 hours a day on it. But then this is a weird thing that happened. One of my MFA people, one of my advisors said, she works in bursts and she'll work on like a novel or a short story collection for 6 to 8 months and then stop for a bunch of months, not write at all. And, I thought, that's not really for me, but I'm finding that's true, that I need after a book, I guess this isn't true for short form as much, but after a book, there's this need to recover. I don't know. You guys probably relate if you've written books, but you need to go back into the inner part of yourself, the incubation part, and read stuff and kind of generate ideas and incubate. And so that period of time that you're not writing is kind of fertile. I never stop actually writing. I always have something going, like I do the morning pages from The Artist's Way almost every day, the 3 pages of longhand in my journal. And I write endless lists of ideas. I have a writer's notebook. And so I'll be always adding to that. And then if I get this brainstorm in the middle of the day, I'll take out my phone and do a little memo or notes or something like that. So I'm constantly tuned into my project, whatever I'm working on, but I'm not constantly writing. It's just the section of the day, and then the other time is just kind of, I don't know, maybe it's like active listening to the story inside. And I know everybody has a different way to do this. And the other thing I like to do is, and I know you asked the question about not just my writing practice, my creative practice, but my forms of writing, like the short form. I'm published it with short stories, and I found myself needing those as a break from the long form. Like the books are like marriages; they're really involved. You're there for years, and I don't know. I can't do it all the time. I have to take breaks. And one of the ways I take breaks but still stay in the fiction world is with short stories. So I like doing Flash especially, and I've studied Flash with a number of teachers at the Loft and other schools, and I love writing really short, like not really 100 words, but maybe 500 word stories, and seeing if I can get that much compactness in and still like achieve the goal of the story. The short form is definitely a relief for helping me not get burned out. But thanks for asking. That's a big question. I hope I answered it okay.
Absolutely, and I think you definitely did. It's just so broad, and especially when you have all of these different forms of writings. And like, if I can ask, how long did it take you to sort of, I guess, strike this balance, like figure out what creative process works for you and like when you should go to the coffee shop, when you should just stay at home?
Yeah, that's a great question. Oh gosh. Well, during the course of writing a novel, this last one that I'm about to publish, A Woman's Guide to Search and Rescue, took me 10 years. I mean, that is
Wow.
really too long, I think. The last one I did, the first novel I did, was not that long, but this one was tough. I started out thinking it was going to be completely a thriller. And so I would write this intense amount of time each day because I was learning the thriller genre. And then I realized halfway through the book, and after my agent got a hold of it and kind of looked at it and went, you're not really a thriller writer. There's a great aspect of thriller in here, but you really need to develop the characters. Thank God she said that. So I had to go back and do the same thing, but I found that, and here's my answer to your question. I found that the plot writing, I could spend a lot of time kind of intensely writing. But then when I got to character development, it took me into a different mode as a writer. I had to spend time researching the characters and kind of brainstorming with myself. I did a collage on each one of them, pictures, stuff on my wall. And I would write kind of like biographies. Like I saw online this week, Jane Friedman, who's a wonderful publishing marketing guru, said that she's writing a genealogy chart for her characters. And I thought that's
Mm.
pretty much the same kind of thing as I was looking at. It's this kind of in-depth exploration, and it's slow. So I couldn't write that long, I had to back off. So that's when I would change locations. I'd go to the coffee shop and I'd do my research on a character there, or sit and listen to people because that gave me ideas for dialogue. And so it was a really different mode. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of where I
Yeah.
went with it.
Yeah, that's definitely super helpful as well. And I know you mentioned this a little bit as well. Do you find that I know you said that short form can be totally a break from your long form work. Do you find that the process itself of writing short form differs a ton from writing novels?
Yeah. Oh man. So, I taught for the Loft for years and years about storyboards, which is a filmmaker's tool for mapping out your story, especially long form stuff. And I would have to do that with a novel because I'd lose track. I mean, really, I lose track of what kind of scenes I had and how many characters I had and where they were. And, they drop out. When my first novel got published, the editor said, "Hey, you lost Chad in chapter 5." And I looked at it and I thought, "Oh my God, he's disappeared." So I had to put him back in. But that's the kind of thing you deal with long books, with novels or memoirs or even nonfiction. So you have to have kind of a map. And for short form, this is an interesting question you're asking, because really, I think more short form is like a spark. And I have a center to it, a spark to it, a germ of an idea that I want to develop. And it's not necessarily the same kind of plot driven thing. I mean, some short stories are, but in a lot of ways, mine are more about the evolution of a character within a very few amount of words. So it's kind of not the same. The two are very, very different for me. I don't map out my short stories hardly ever. Good question.
Thank you. So pivoting a little bit, what literary works have influenced you like the most, and do you have any recommendations?
Oh, wow. Well, you should see my bookshelves. I'm all over the map. It's so right now I'm reading an older memoir called Ordinary Light by Tracy Smith. She's the poet laureate who won the Pulitzer, and I love her style of writing. I have to have a shout out to Louise Erdrich, of course. I read everything she writes. I like Juliet Otsuka, who wrote uh, When the Emperor Was King, I think, or the Emperor. Ooh, gosh, it escapes me anyway. But I love her work, and I think I'm drawn to writers that have kind of characters that I really understand. They're flawed, maybe, but I get them. They have some aspect of them that I understand. They connect with my reality. And then the setting, I need to sink into the setting and experience it tangibly. So Erdrich is so skilled at that, and so is Otsuka. Frederick Bachman, the movie A Man Called Otto is based on The Man Called Ove, and I've read all of Bachman's books. Some of them I love, and some of them I'm not as fond of. Anxious People was one he wrote that I thought was brilliant. And he's able to go through enormous amount of characters and still keep us present in the story, which is really hard. But lately, because my novel is a cross-genre novel, and it's part thriller, as I said, that's where I started, and part what they call family saga. So as I've been getting trade reviews from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly and places like that, they're naming it that. They're calling it a cross-genre book. So I didn't ever know that there was such a thing, but as I'm looking at my history as a reader, I notice how I'm really drawn to that kind of book. I'm drawn to thrillers or intense plot driven books that also have a very literary feel. There's introspection and there's time taken in the interior lives of the characters, not just what's happening outside. So one of my favorite writers for that is Peter Heller. He's from Colorado, and he's written maybe 5 books, 5 novels. My favorite is called The Dog Stars, which is it's speculative fiction. It's post-apocalyptic after a virus wipes out most of humanity, and there's just these few people left. And this one man who's a pilot, and I'm really drawn to pilots too in stories. The one man who's a pilot goes off to find out if there's anyone else out there, and it's a beautiful book. I won't spoil it for you, but he's got this ability to take a tense situation and still bring out the characters. So my situation with my story was that I wanted to have two estranged sisters from different parts of a troubled family, basically a fractured family. One of them has never met the other, and the other one has longed all her life to meet the first sister. So these two women are thrust together in a really dramatic situation. They're both pilots. One of them's plane crashes. She's escaping from an attacker, and her estranged sister is forced to hide her. So it's kind of like I didn't know that I was doing this, but I'm also making a literary thriller. And I'm grateful that there is even a name for what I'm doing. And Peter Heller was the first person I thought of when I wanted to give an example. One more person that I would really recommend if you're interested in that genre is Lisa Lutz. And she wrote a book called The Passenger that is an amazing, amazing story. It's so unexpected what happens in there. So I'm really thrilled with those kinds of books.
How have you found community to play a role in your creative process? And this could be classroom environment, writing groups, just the input of loved ones, anything like that.
Yeah, I couldn't live without community in writing. I think writers are in isolation so much, and community is what keeps us sane. I really think, my life is pretty balanced. I have a really good relationship, and everything in my life seems okay. And I think it's partly because I have this community of people to lean on when the writing takes me way too far off center. I have the loft classes, of course, and I also teach in Boston at Grub Street. And that community of students and colleagues has been wonderful for me. And then I have actually, I found these people through online classes, which is something I love. The loft offers such great ones. So I have a group of four. There are four of us, all of us published, and we're working in different genres, fiction and memoir. And we meet every month and talk about one person's writing. We get it ahead of time. And we spend about an hour. Everybody gets about 15, 20 minutes to verbally give feedback. And then we also do track changes and send the document to the person that's being critiqued. And I found this group to be incredible. So insightful. I've been in many, many writing groups, and this one is the best one I've ever been in. And then I also have another person that I met through the Fine Arts Work Center online classes. She lives in New Mexico, and she's also a published writer, but she's in the horror genre and completely different kind of writer than me, but she's such a great feedback person. So we exchange when we're both working on a piece, short story or novel, we'll exchange chapters every week. And so we'll go back and forth. That's pretty intensive, but she's just fabulous. So I love these people that I depend on. I've tried lots of different writing forums online and stuff like that, but finally I was able to get this little support system together, and I really love it. So those are my people.
It seems like there's a lot of, I guess, cross-genre writing. Do you find that working with peers who work in completely different genres to you has been super helpful to kind of get feedback from a perspective that isn't necessarily so aligned with what you do personally?
That's a great question too. Well, I'm thinking about the memoir writers in my little group of four. One of them is really a dedicated memoir writer. She's been published very widely and is really good. And her feedback tends to be more the introspective meaning feedback, which I think memoir is so good at. And then the novelists are really into the characters and the development of the plot. So I do get really well-rounded feedback from cross-genre. You're right. I used to try to get into groups that only had my own kind of genre in them, not even my own kind of book. But I found that, if they're good writers and they have experience, they tend to be excellent at feedback. In I can use pretty much everything they say.
That's so wonderful. Oh my goodness. So Now talking a little bit about your upcoming class. So, writing and risk aligning your creativity with your life. So this explores authenticity and its importance for writing for
Mhm.
writers and readers. And could you speak a little bit to how authenticity has played a role in your work? I know you spoke on it a little bit earlier with finding your own style, all that jazz, but yeah, just a little bit more on that.
Sure. It's a funny word, authenticity. It's overused right now a little bit, but to me, what it means is it partners with risk, how much risk the writer is willing to take to reveal what really matters in her writing or his writing. And so, my question always in my own life is how much I'm willing to dive into it, to be aligning my, say, personal narrative with the book's narrative. So I wonder, when I find my writing is too superficial, or I get feedback from my group that says, we couldn't quite get into this person, this character, or this section of the story. I have to look at that and ask myself, what am I trying to say here? But also, what am I trying to hide? And
Mhm.
so, do I accept the risk of being vulnerable and revealing what I'm going to maybe get criticized for or looked down upon? And, you know, us writers, we stay as safe as possible for a while when we're starting out, perhaps, depends on your personality. But I know that, I became a food writer originally because food was something safe in our house in my growing up years. It was something that we all loved and we all talked about. Like my dad, who is not an easy person, I love him tremendously, but he and I talked about food. We could talk about food till the next meal. And so that was safe for me as a writer. I could go into that world and communicate my feelings without any sense of I'm going to get censored. But with fiction, I have a lot of risks. And I'm talking in this new book about at least three risks that I have. I had to really work it to see if I was willing to be that vulnerable on the page. And I was thinking about my first novel, which is called Qualities of Light. And it's a queer YA story about a teen girl. And she falls in love with her best friend the same summer that her younger brother is almost killed in an accident she causes. So she's basically ostracized from her family. And she's fallen in love with a girl. She didn't know that she was a same sex identified person, and her brother is in a coma, the brother that she loves, and it's because of her. So she's in this place of incredible internal twists. So I wanted to kind of explore what that would be like, but then I wanted her to also become the hero of the story. So her family's very fractured. I notice I write about fractured families a lot. So I wanted to explore the idea of young people as heroes in their own lives, but also following their own path, their truest path, like hers is to love who she loves. She can also begin to save the family that she's in. So she becomes the hero that actually saves her parents in the end, makes them survive this situation. Her brother ends up fine. But this is a big aspect of my life and my own writing. How do I risk talking about a young girl being a hero? That's a big deal for me. So that goes back to my childhood. Can I be a hero in my past as well, in my own mind? And my passionate interests happen to be around women heroes of all ages. So this kind of translates into my new book, which I wanted to be a larger story than just a young girl. I wanted three women who were taking huge risks. And I think the biggest risks in my new novel, which I'll be discussing with Kate St. Vincent Vogel on the 24th at my open book launch, which you're invited to. But aside from the risks inherent in publishing and writing a novel, I can narrow my personal risks to three that I dealt with in this book. One is the topic of siblings, sisters. My older sister was an addict, and she died tragically early in her life, and it really, really affected our family. I had a lot of trepidation about writing about sisters, but I wanted to take that risk, right? and write about something that mattered to me deeply, and to be vulnerable about the idea of what if sisters who were estranged came back together. Because with my sister, I'll never be able to, rescue her. But these two sisters did rescue themselves and each other. And then the second thing that I kind of took this huge risk about was to write a cross-genre book. It doesn't fit neatly into publishing categories. And I was afraid that the reviewers, especially the trade reviews, would kind of get like, where does this book fit? It doesn't really make sense. But actually, the trade reviews were excellent. So I feel like that risk I took to write what I needed to write, both a thriller and a family saga, actually worked out really well. And then the third thing that I took a huge risk about with this book is to write about all kinds of romantic relationships. There's two same-sex partners in the book, and then there's one heterosexual couple that is really prominent in the book. I believe love is love, and it's always been that way for me, and you can't pigeonhole it into certain identities or groups. So I wanted to write about that, not exclusively one kind of relationship versus another, like I did in my first book, but that everybody's okay. Love is love. So those are my risks. And I think Kate and I are going to really go into this during the book launch and explore it further. And I'm excited because I have no idea what she's going to ask me, but I always learn, like from your questions. This has been great to
Thank you
kind
so
of
much.
explore new things. Yeah.
So, speaking of this upcoming talk, where can people find you? Where can people find your work? Do you want to give some information about your class?
Yeah. I think the class only has one seat open, but probably it'll be sold out by the time this airs. But
Right.
you can get on the wait list. The Loft does have online, class lists, so you can find it there at loft.org. I also have a website, marycarrollmoore.com, that you can check out about my book launch and about my new book and my other books, including Your Book Starts Here, which is my writing craft book, and Qualities of Light, which is the prequel actually to this book, A Woman's Guide to Search and Rescue. And I also write a newsletter on Substack that I'd love to have readers for. If you're not into Substack, you should be, because it's fabulous. It really is such a fertile, it's like the new social media people are talking about. But anyway, it's a great place to meet other writers and to get informed, about different ways of writing. So my Substack is called Your Weekly Writing Exercise. And on my website, there's a sign up form. So you can check it out if you want. It's free. And it comes every Friday, and it has a different topic. Like this today, I think my topic was, or tomorrow is called Street Launch Teams, which are like book doulas that help you launch your book. So I interviewed this cool woman who is a YA horror novelist, and she had a book that got optioned for Netflix, and she had a street team that helped her launch her book. And so I interviewed her about that. So that's my newsletter for this week. But I'd love to see more readers. Yes.
Awesome. That's so exciting. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me. This
Yeah.
was an absolute joy.
Oh, I'm just so thrilled. I loved your questions, Alex, and it was a great interview. So thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much. All right. Well, have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.